John Ablett is a registered social worker and certified holotropic breathwork practitioner. Originally trained as a graphic designer, he worked in preschool playgroup and as a computer programmer before starting his second career in mental health work. For over 10 years now, he has worked in very ordinary states of consciousness with unhoused people, helping them to live independently. John's account of integrating his own psychospiritual crisis as a young man, in which he traveled as a barefoot guru, is published in the collection Breaking Open, Finding a Way Through Spiritual Emergency. He co-facilitates a regular peer support group for the Spiritual Crisis Network. John is undertaking training to become an art psychotherapist as a way of supporting others to visually express and integrate deep experiences, and has contributed a chapter on the use of mandalas for holotropic integrations into the edited volume Psychedelics and Psychotherapy, The Healing Potential of Expanded States. You can see more of John's work at his website, www.holotropicmandalas.com. John, so good to see you. Welcome to Holotropic Journeys. Thank you for joining. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Yes,
Awesome.
I'm happy to be here.
Likewise, I've been visually engrossed in your art for longer than I actually realized, because I first came to learn of your work through the book Psychedelic Integration by Mark Exchala, and at the time I didn't know that was your work, and then I happened to come across the spiritual emergency book Breaking Open by Jules Evans and Tim Reed. That's it.
Tim Reed, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that the two looked familiar, so that kind of led me onto this. Who is the person that creates these incredible mandalas, and that led me to you. So I finally get to meet the man behind the mandalas.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could start by kind of getting to know a little bit about you and kind of what brought you to this work and what led you on your journey.
Sure, okay. So when I was 21, I had a spiritual emergency in which I dropped out of university. I had an experience in which I believed I was enlightened, and I traveled as a barefoot guru for 6 months. It was an experience that completely turned my life upside down, and I put it to the back of my mind for about 10 years. And it wasn't until I got to the stage where I was ready to settle down. I was about to get married. I was working in mental health. And I thought, I want to find a way to make my peace with this experience. I don't want to be living in fear of it, living in fear that it will turn my life upside down again. I need to know what it was. And that led me to Groff's work through his book, The Stormy Search for the Self. And I had remembered this term holotropic breathwork, which was described in there as being a way of integrating incomplete spiritual emergencies. And I began making inquiries, and somebody said, "Oh, you're really lucky. Groff is making a rare visit to England, within the next few months. Maybe you'd like to come along to that." And I did. And it was an extraordinary moment for me. Suddenly recognizing that there were other people who were kind of interested in this realm, interested in working with it, had expertise in working with it. I realized then for the first time in my life that I had a choice about how I related to my own experience, and that was life-changing for me.
And so this is some years after your original spiritual emergency, and you wanted to go back into that. So were you able to, through holotropic breathwork, kind of process this?
Yes. Initially, I went into it thinking I would get the experience back again, that I would experience it in the same way that I did in my early 20s. That never happened. But what did happen is that I had a whole load of experiences that put my experiences into a completely different context, contexts of experiences earlier in my life, ancestral experiences in my family tree, wider mythological experiences, and it was almost as though it was taking the experience to pieces, and focusing very intently on each little piece, so that I could see it in the context of the whole.
Wow. And I mean, this takes a lot of bravery to look back or prepare to re-experience. So you had this initial experience, and you're a holotropic breathwork practitioner now. So how did that journey unfold?
It's important to say that I don't practice as a holotropic breathwork practitioner, but it was more that I wanted to make sure that if I was going to do this, I wanted to do it properly, because that experience had been so large that I wanted to follow it to its source if I possibly could. I didn't want to half integrate it, and that meant signing up for the whole journey.
And so when did this journey take place for you?
So I probably spent about 12 years doing the holotropic breathwork training, because I wanted to do it slowly. I wanted to do it properly, and cautiously as well. I didn't want to rush it. I didn't want to, trigger an intense experience that it would take me a long time to deal with, because I'd had that experience earlier in my life of doing it too quickly. So it was nice to actually be able to take my time over it, to savor it.
And then a big part of this work for you then is the mandalas. So is that something that you connected with straight away, or did you find your own way into that process?
No, it took me a long time to do that. Prior to my spiritual emergency experience as a young man, I had trained to be an artist, and I was interested in doing, spiritual, mythological artwork, and I would spend incredible amounts of time over it during the day. I would go to sleep at night, and the images would be burnt into the back of my eyelids, and then I'd be dreaming about them. And when I had my experience, I thought, oh, actually, this is somehow triggered by these images. That there is something activating about deep imagery that I need to be careful of. And I would say I avoided doing artwork over that 10-year period for the same reason that it was too powerful for me. And I spent easily 5 years just scribbling on the backs of envelopes, freeform. And over time, those images became more fluid, more lyrical. And I realized that I was teaching myself to draw in a different kind of way. So when I first started doing the breath work, I remember thinking, how can I possibly begin to even depict this in an image? Because I'm sat there in the breathwork room with a circle. I've got about 15 minutes to draw something, and I'm thinking, I can't do that. So I was just initially doing more of my scribble pictures and, just trying to do what I could, but I couldn't really see the point of it. And then kind of further into the breath work, the sessions I was having were just so large. I was filling, many pages of a notebook with notes about what had happened. And I thought, well, actually, I need to find a way to capture this properly. And I don't know why, but at some point I suddenly hit on the idea of putting all of the different elements of the session into one picture, a little bit like medieval people used to do, like the Bayeux tapestry, to actually use the picture to tell the story. And I could have different parts of myself acting out different sections of it. And I liked that. And I thought, wow. And then what slowly happened was I thought, well, actually, if I'm going to do this properly, I need to take this away and spend time on it. So it grew to the stage where I was spending at least a couple of years between sessions just filling in everything that I could. And the mandalas became both the main integration activity, but also the main spiritual practice for me. became that I was doing the holotropic breath work to make the material for the mandalas and not the other way around.
Wow. And I mean, so this then became your median for spiritual practice in a sense, and raising the experiences. And then now you're sharing these experiences. So I mean, that feels like almost like an evolution to the integration. So how did you kind of come to the decision that you felt comfortable sharing?
Well, initially it was a practical one and a frustration because I spent so long over my mandalas. I never had the opportunity to share them in the sharing circle at the end of the workshop. So I was always left with feeling that there was something incomplete and I wanted to be able to share it. So I took to taking a folder of my artwork to subsequent modules so it could become a shorthand for my sharing. So I could say, well, this is what happened in my last session. And this element here also appeared. And then I found that other people were just enjoying looking at them and getting a lot out of them and responding to them in ways that were completely separate to my own session. And I realized then that, well, actually, there can be a kind of a collective integration of intense imagery as well as a personal one.
Wow. And then you've gone on to have your work published in a few different books and different areas, including the Holotropic Breathwork book. So I'm guessing at
Yeah.
some point Stan has seen your work, and did he have any thoughts on your work?
Well, he was saying that it was something that he would like to have in his book and asked me to send him my archive of images so he could use those in his presentation. Christina Groff also responded really well to them and asked a lot of questions, which was nice. When I saw them there in his book, these were the first mandalas that I'd had published anywhere. I thought, wow, I've created an image here that is going to live after my death. And that was a very odd feeling. And that also fed into this idea that, well, actually, I needed to find a way to share them.
So yeah, so you've had your work now published in a few different places. Would you be okay with going through some of these together?
Absolutely, yeah. I've got some here that let me know when you can see those.
Oh yeah, perfect. Wow. Could you, could you share does this one have a name at all? Like, I mean, how do you even go through that process? So much to give it a name, I guess.
So the name is actually the last thing to come after I finished working on it. So this one was, I think, between about 2 and 3 years. This one actually covered the whole of the period of the pandemic, and it's entitled "Reconstructing the Point of No Return."
And so my question is, where do you start something like this? How does this begin?
Okay, so it starts in a holotropic session or a series of holotropic sessions. It's important to say that most of my holotropic sessions are actually very physical. I very rarely see anything. So what happens to me is I experience things physically in my body and I imagine scenarios that make sense of what I'm feeling physically. So then I will play act those. So I'm acting out a story, and that then feeds into the process as a whole. So at the end of the session, I will jot down notes. I don't write longhand, this is what happened to me. I will just write numbered bullet points of the scenario, the stories that came up, the sensations I felt. Sometimes I will take a couple of weeks to do that because things may come back to me afterwards. And then at some point, as I'm kind of reading through those, an idea will come to me of something that feels the most important thing that I want to convey from that session. Often it's something I don't want to put down on paper. Often it's something that feels very uncomfortable. And that is often the thing that usually goes right in the center. In this particular example, what you've got here is the mask that is not a mask. So it's an image of a face that is made up of various different other images. And this is the idea of a sacred mask. In a lot of cultures, people will put on a mask in order to do shamanic work or something like that. And there had been some times when I had tried to physically make masks myself, following on from the sessions, but it didn't feel right. And what seemed to be coming out of the sessions was that the mask is kind of an attitude. It's a lens almost that we put on that says, right now I'm going into this space, I'm doing sacred work, and we take it off when we exit that space. So the elements here that make it up, there is a box element here. This is the lid of the box. That's the box. These are the sides. That is the base of it. So it's a deconstructed box. Down here you have a figure of a porter that reminded me of the porter from the end of the film Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I'm not sure if you know the sequence, but after they've brought the Ark of the Covenant back to the museum, Indiana Jones is asking his friends what's going to happen to it. And they say, never mind, it's being looked at by top men. And Indiana Jones says, well, who? And they say, just top men. And then you see the porter with this box, and he's taking this box with the Ark of the Covenant, this most sacred object, into this warehouse that is just full from floor to ceiling with other boxes. And for me, the porter is actually the hero, because the porter is the person who knows where everything is. So in this image, the warehouse is like the personal archive. It's the place where the sacred things are stored, the ancestral memories. I'm conscious I've done a lot of talking and I can't actually see you.
Yeah,
So
no, I'm still here. Sorry, I've just I'm completely transfixed. The longer you stare at it, the more that comes out of it. Yeah.
shall I just keep on talking?
Yeah, I love hearing you just go for it. So please continue. Thank you.
Sure. So the other main axes that you have here are, you have a doorway in and a doorway out. At the doorway in, you have someone with a Trojan horse around their neck. And the Trojan horse here is it's a metaphor for an unexpressed sadness. This is ancestral stuff. So these are secrets that are carried in families that are perhaps never given voice to, but which we might be aware of because other people carry them in their bodies, and when we hug them, we feel some of that in our bodies. So that kind of experience is like a Trojan horse in the sense that it's something that we take into ourselves without realizing what we've taken in, and then it unpacks internally. So that is a moment of death, and what we have here is a moment of birth. So they're both happening at the same time. But the birth here is actually into a realm that is between life and death. It's a stuck place, such as some people might experience in the womb where they get stuck. There was a territory here that was a bit like the wood of the suicides in Dante's Divine Comedy. Where the people have turned into trees, passing through there. Then this is the image of the children's fairy tale of the giant turnip. The farmer plants a turnip in his field that can't be pulled up, and he has to enlist the help of his wife, the dog, the mouse. I think the entire village is eventually involved in trying to pull the giant turnip up. And once the giant turnip is pulled up, there is enough turnip soup for everyone. And I think there are issues in the psyche that are like giant turnips. You know, those things that our ancestors weren't able to deal with, that we aren't able to deal with, that everyone gets stuck with, and everyone who touches them gets stuck too. So in this part of the session, I'm trying to dig the turnip up, and I'm being helped by some skeletal figures here of ancestors. And then we have this explosive moment here. So it's important to say, as I said, that all of this was happening during the period of the pandemic. I remember leaving this particular workshop, and after a couple of weeks feeling, actually, I don't feel like I'm going back to normal, because it feels like everyone's in a holotropic state right now. Everyone's kind of in a state of shock about what's happening. And this image here of the soldiers in the trenches belongs kind of both to the session of, you know, feeling stuck, but also that period of waiting, you know, not knowing what's going to happen next, and uncertainty. Those are some of the main themes in there. I'll just mention also, if I may, this figure here, which also forms the nose of the face and the eyes. These are scales. These are scales, like in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The heart is weighed against a feather at the moment of death. Oops, there we go.
Yeah.
So the figure here, when I was a child, I used to have a recurring nightmare that I was looking up at myself through a hole in the sky. And as soon as I recognized that it was me looking out at the hole in the sky, I would fall, and I would feel a churning in my stomach, and I would fall back into the bed. So this references that experience, and it's also kind of referencing that kind of part of me that was the guru during my spiritual emergency. And it's tied, as you see it here, to this ancestral figure, this dark ancestral figure with a spear. And this is a story that emerged over the course of many breathworks, which was the idea that I had a twin, or that I may have had a twin that died in the womb. My grandma was a twin, and my mum thought that she miscarried when she was when she was having me. So it is possible, but I don't know. It's a story that I try to hold lightly, because it's very easy to go, yes, you know, this is the story that's coming up in my breath work, so this must be what happened to me. And no, I think it is a useful story that has a symbolic function to it. And the symbolic function of that story, I think, is that my spiritual emergency experience, in which I thought that I was enlightened and I felt an incredible sense of oneness, was also in a sense connected to something that was unborn, or something that hadn't been born, something that was connected to death in some way, and something that didn't quite belong in this world. And I think that was also why it was a difficult experience to integrate, as many spiritual emergencies are, because they can leave you with a sense of being attached to something that you can't explain to other people. So yeah, that is why this figure is looking out from there.
And then, I mean, if I could just interrupt and ask, so
Yeah, of
this
course.
is the process as it unfolded. I mean, I can see how this kind of, to a degree, could keep going. So I wonder, like, how do you get to a point where the mandala feels complete?
So I think initially, I'd drawn the mask, I'd drawn these insects, I'd drawn this, I'd drawn that, but it still didn't feel complete. I didn't know what needed to go in the other sections. And at that point, I left it. These were just outlines, sketches at that point. So I left it. I went to my next breathwork session. I thought, aha, right, okay, this bit belongs in this section here. This bit belongs in this section here. I think I still had some gaps, but I had enough of a sense of it to begin coloring in. Basically, once the circle is full, once I feel there are no gaps there, that's the point at which it is finished. Or it's finished in the sense of I finished drawing it, but then it goes up on my wall and I have an ongoing relationship with it, and the pictures can then come to take on different meanings. I notice different things.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I've put some of those up on the wall myself, and yeah, I just want to pull one of the quotes from something that you wrote in the psychedelics and psychotherapy book. Just about the fact that it's a process. You said integration is a process, not an event. The meaning of an image like this will never be found neatly defined in a dictionary of symbols. And yeah, that just really spoke to me, from the sense of like what it is in one moment, maybe completely different. You know, the part can be completely different when you look at it in the context of the whole. Mm. Yeah.
The most recent insight that I had from this was probably within the last fortnight, actually, that I realized that the title, Reconstructing the Point of No Return, that there was a kind of a pun in that. So when I thought of it, I was talking about, that kind of pivotal moment, this kind of moment between life and death where there's no going back. Then because there were these themes of ancestral dynamics that were connected with ideas of suicide that were in the family tree that hadn't been spoken about. There is another kind of no return associated with that, and the idea of someone seeking a place of no return. And then, of course, you've got this kind of Buddha figure in the center here, and their no return has this spiritual context. It's talking about transcending the cycle of death and rebirth in a completely different way, in a spiritual sense. So all of those things are kind of tied up in that image.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, this is I think that you can look at the image, and I've had the chance to to be with it for a few weeks now in preparation for this. But then just hearing you kind of unpack and unfold the story of how it came to be, it just it's powerful. Thank you so much for sharing.
And that's probably about 15% of what's in there.
Yeah. Are you open to sharing some more of your artworks?
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, this is kind of recognizing that at the time of birth, an infant can be in this place that feels like it is caught between life and death. So you've got the cemetery at the bottom here. You've got the cosmic mother here, almost like the Egyptian sky goddess with the stars. This image of the umbilical cord, it was actually, in the session, it was a tree. So it was like the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. And there were various other images of trees, people climbing trees, people celebrating their marriage in a swing, me riding my bike into the tree at the bottom of the garden. And it seemed to me that the umbilical cord was a way of expressing the idea that the infant through the mother has access to all of these ancestral memories. There is also this idea of miscarriage here, of the baby falling. These kinds of almost wires attached to the baby's head, just that sense of wow, there's so much information coming in here. It's like I'm plugged into a telephone network, and it's snowing because it's very, very cold. And in the session, all of this was also connected to a dear friend who had died tragically in a car accident in which he'd driven into a flood and drowned. Again, all connected to the kinds of really intense life or death situations that can happen in the womb.
And how long was this mandala formed over?
This is a shorter one. This is probably about a year. These are kind of in reverse chronological order, so I think they become quicker as we go through. One of the things that I've realized in working with mandalas in the way that I do is that they don't necessarily have an orientation. Because it's a circle, these can go any way up, and different stories will be told depending on which way up it goes. So with this one, I realized that you could also have it as the baby falling towards the mother's arms, away from the realm of death, and that would make equal sense.
And does that mean just does that come to you when you sort of see it from that different orientation, or?
Yes, it does. Again, I suppose it links to the idea of the unborn twin, which, as I say, I try to hold lightly, which would be a context in which life and death were happening simultaneously. But of course, every symbol has its shadow. Life and death are always included, regardless of what it is that we choose to focus on.
Hmm.
The little glass coffin here is the image from Snow White of kind of being in this state again of, not quite dead, not quite alive, not quite fully participating in life. I think at those times when people are in a state of shock, they can become detached from their own bodies in that kind of way.
And then I guess it's on the left now. I want to say it's a pig-looking image. I'm entirely.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure of the meaning of that either.
Oh, okay.
I think it was in the session. It was kind of a cross between it was a cross between a donkey and a pig.
Wow.
And when I draw it, it reminds me of there is a classic cartoon from the 19th century called A Drop of London Water.
Hmm.
In which all of these microscopic creatures are swimming around. It's a bit like one of those, but it's also, you'll see it's got stars. It's got a constellation to it. It's both very tiny and very large at the same time.
Hmm.
It's crowned. It's definitely biting the finger. I think that's an element of the session that is yet to work its way out.
So these they're still kind of. I mean, I've had it used before. Complete within a larger incompleteness.
Yeah. I think with holotropic sessions, there can be a tendency when you have a very large session to go, this is the bit that I like. This is the bit that makes sense to me. This is the bit that I want to draw. But I realized fairly early on that I got a lot more out of it when I tried to find ways to draw the whole thing, including and in particular the bits that didn't make sense. Because then it kind of functions as a snapshot of the psyche, and it continues to evolve over time. Also, with this one, after I had drawn it, when it was on the wall, I was looking at this headstone and this obelisk and thinking, they look a bit to me like the blade and hilt of a sword. So I went back to, I had a photocopy of the drawing that I'd made before I started colouring it in. So I drew that. I drew that as a broken sword. And then I also found myself looking at the odd shape of the cemetery gates here and thinking that that reminded me a little bit of a crown. So the crown of the, I want to call it a water bear, but I don't know what that means here. And that led me to the idea that this could be a crown as well. This here, which didn't make much sense to me, it was kind of a vortex, one of those kinds of places of, really intense energy that are difficult to put a form to. So it felt like it needed a frame around it, and that became a mirror. And then I noticed myself looking at the branches of the tree, the veins of the umbilical cord. I thought, that reminds me a bit of an umbrella. So I drew these things. I titled this one The Gifts of the Psyche. And then these images then found their way into the next session and the next mandala. So if you see this figure here, the tightrope walker,
Right.
is holding the umbrella, has the broken sword, and the crown.
Wow.
So he's using the umbrella and the broken sword to balance himself. And this is about navigating very, very thin holotropic places. Those places where it feels like if you take one step to the right, then you're wide awake. If you take one step to the left, you are fast asleep. And just trying to hold that tension and, hold the experience very, very lightly. It's like a tightrope. The image that came to me in the session was actually of the famous tightrope walker Charles Blondin, who did a tightrope walk across Niagara Falls. So that has found its way into here. You can see the Horseshoe Falls there.
And then so this image, it looks to me like there's a sitter involved in this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is one of those sessions where for at least the first hour and a half, because I could time it because of the music, I thought, there's nothing happening. Nothing's happening here. Because I've had, a lot of very, very big sessions, I actually look forward to the day when nothing happens for the entire session. And then I will think, okay, I am complete now. There's nothing further to come up. But in this context, I thought, oh, no, it's not that nothing's happening. I'm dead. I'm like a pharaoh in a tomb. My sitter is dead. I believe my sitter actually fell asleep, but I was thinking about the way that the pharaohs used to have their slaves buried with them, buried alive often. During one of the breaks, I was almost moved to tears by seeing one of the waiters bringing out a tray of biscuits and orange juice while the session was still going on. I could feel his fear because there were all of these strange sounds coming from inside, and it was almost as though he was just wanting to drop the tray and run. So that kind of fed into this scenario as well. But in this session, as the pharaoh, I thought, well, I'm dead here. I'm entombed in my pyramid. I'm clearly not going to be reborn. I've been buried with all of my treasures here. What's the point of this? I actually begged for the robbers to break in and steal my things because that would be preferable to being stuck here until the end of time. This is actually a robber here tunneling in. That it happened that in my hotel room, I turned on the television in the middle of the night, and there was a documentary about how they used candles to light the way with this kind of upturned bowl to stop the candle from blowing out. So you see here the canopic jars, which is where they used to place the internal organs of the pharaoh before they embalmed the body. And I realized that I still had my heart intact. And I thought I'd been buried without the proper rituals. I think I read recently that they did actually leave the heart in place, which I didn't realize. I'm wondering if this is part of the Egyptian funerary rituals with the heart being weighed in the scales. But in this context, I'm offering my heart to the monk. This is a Buddhist monk here. The Buddhist monk is because it was a module that had Buddhist meditation alongside it, and it was the story of the monk, I think, who sat with the Buddha while the Buddha was dying and was moved to tears. And later his friends said to him, well, you know what, why do you weep when you know that everything is an illusion? And he said, the loss of a friend is the greatest of all illusions. And that is the title.
So the title of this one is The Greatest of All Illusions?
That's correct, yeah.
Wow. And I did want to ask if you'd be okay to share the image in the very center there, kind of in the center of the chest, kind of more solar plexus area.
Yeah.
Something in a box.
Whoops, here we go. Yeah,
Wow.
so it's an unexploded bomb. So the detonator has been removed. So the heart was inside the bomb. There's a sense there of carrying something in the body, an ancestral trauma that will be fatal if it's not diffused, and it's replaced by the acorn. The seed of something else that might grow.
And just because it's quite closely related there, so there's the book, which just seems to be chained, or the chain's broken.
Yeah, this was the Book of the Dead, so the book of the spells that the pharaoh has, or that the pharaoh has to speak to make safe passage into the afterlife. It's something about being free of that, and something about accepting death as death and not as a portal to rebirth in the Egyptian sense, which ironically enough is in the session was a kind of a surrender experience that led to its own rebirth, but not in an Egyptian context.
Thank you. I mean, I feel like I could ask so many more questions about this, but yeah, knowing that we're probably just scratching the surface with it, and want to be mindful of time.
Shall we
Yeah, if you have any more that you'd be open to sharing.
move on to another one? Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So yeah, I'll start by saying this one particularly speaks to me because of the spiral unfolding. That's
Yeah.
personally a symbol that means a lot. But yeah, I feel like that must add like a whole other layer of complexity, because it has to then unfold in I mean, it does unfold in a certain manner.
Yeah, this is a nice one to end on, actually, because it's an almost complete perinatal cycle from the womb here to an experience of birth. But we begin with the fetus here and the cogs and the machinery. The fetus is recognizing that it is somehow connected in a personal way to everything that is wrong with the world. So you see here a camera, a dying child in a desert with the tree, and the fetus is going, I am all of that. I starve myself, I mourn myself, I watch myself. sleeping on a park bench here. I make myself homeless. There's the atomic cloud here. I make war with myself. And the fetus decides that its world is flawed, and so it must burn. It becomes the Lord of Fire, setting fire to everything, the entire world. And it's a cold fury. It's calculating. It's cosmic. It has no compassion. And there was a recognition that that kind of cosmic ruthlessness was associated with my spiritual emergency, with my experience as a barefoot guru. You know, during that period, I was willing to leave my home and family. Everything could burn in the fire of my vision. And what we have here are, you know, a series of figures, a series of physical holding that's encouraging me to stay in my body, to come back from this cosmic place, because there are people here that I love and want to be with, and they want to be with me. And so that begins a process of the physical process again, kind of starts with a kind of a buzz. It's a buzz in the throat. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, am I a wasp? You know, a wasp emerging from my cocoon. Yeah, I'm so thirsty, but I'm only able to get, you know, little hits of sweetness through my tongue like a wasp. And then the buzzing just builds, and suddenly it becomes this roar, and I realize I'm a tiger. I'm being born. There's this roar that's coming out of me. Felt like there was a tight metal band around my head that was suddenly gone, and I was opening out like a flower, and there was sunlight on my face.
And that's BPM 4, is it?
Yeah,
Opening into the
yeah,
sunlight. Yeah, wow.
yeah, yeah. So you've gone from BPM 2, I guess, through BPM 3 with the fire to BPM 4. And there's a period of choking here with the umbilical cord around the neck as well that precipitated all of this.
And how long did this piece take, if you recall?
Maybe about 6 months and 3 lifetimes.
Yeah. Wow. John, thank you so much for sharing all of these. I can't tell you how and just as you were explaining there, I was really reflecting on just, this is the most intimate art that someone can share. And it's just, I really just want to commend for sharing it, because it's very psychoactivating for me, and it brings up, and I know, just, you don't see many other people's mandalas. We share kind of in circle, but then you bring them home and do what they will with them. So it's really inspiring to me as I'm kind of finding my way into how do I find my own meaning with my coming from my sessions. And it really means a lot for you to be able to share the process, while touching on some of the material. Yeah, really, thank you so much for this.
There were a couple of things that Jung said that inspired me to use work in this way. One was that during the period when he was working on his artwork, he said that his anima said to him, "Why, this is art." And he said, "No, it's not." He was aware that it was something else. And I thought about that a lot, and I realized that, I had to find this route that respected the fact that it wasn't artwork. It was not about what it looked like. It was about the process and honoring the sacredness of it. And the second thing that he said was that it was important because these things from the psyche were like gifts. It was important to spend as much time as you can doing justice to them through the artwork.
Yeah, I'm definitely at the young phase of my self studies, and there was a quote that I saw that he said something along the lines of, symbols are from the psyche as flowers are from the plant. And I was
Yeah.
really meditating on that for a while, and kind of as this relates to your work in particular, I think it's, it's one thing to receive the symbol, it's one thing to receive the flower, see the flower, but it's another thing to then potentiate with meaning. Pollinating of a flower is what brings life, and for it to bear fruit. So I see that with your work in the sense of it's you've produced a flower and pollinated with meaning, and now it's like for the fruits of that to spread and to see new inspiration. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Wild. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And if anyone was interested in learning more about your work, I mean, hearing more of your story, is there anywhere that you would direct people to?
So I have a website, www.holotropicmandalas.com. Some of the mandalas are available for sale through that, so that people can have their own copies if they would like them. There are also, I've written the chapter in the psychedelics and psychotherapy book that you mentioned earlier, which unpacks some more of my mandalas and the process in general. So maybe if you could link to that in the show notes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also the chapter in Breaking Open, which talks about my spiritual guru phase, which is a whole other story that sadly we don't have time for.
Right, right. Well, perhaps if there's another time that you would care to unpack that, I'd love to speak through this more. Thoroughly
Sure.
enjoyed this, and yeah, incredibly inspiring for me and many others, I'm sure. So thank you so much for your time and your openness.
Thank you, Wild.
Okay, John. Well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, evening, and yeah, I look forward to doing this again sometime, hopefully.
Thank you.
Well,
Yes.
thank you. Bye bye.